There is a silent and mysterious cemetery in the southeastern part of Iran in the village of Tiz, an ancient village at least 2,300 years old. In the beliefs of the Baloch people are associated with the mystery and deep silence of its nature and historical monuments. The cemetery of Jinn, what the Baloch call Jinn Sant, is one of these secrets. Locals believe that these tombs belong to the Jinn. They have buried their dead in the fence of these stones, and when night falls, the Jinn will appear on the graves of their lost ones and mourn them. They say that whoever goes to this graveyard at night will be cursed by the Jinn and will surely die with a severe punishment after a few days. Why is this cemetery known as the Cemetery of Jinn at all? The main reason is the tombstones of this cemetery. The tombstones planted in this cemetery are in such a way that they bear no resemblance to the tombstones of a human being. Although many of these stones were destroyed over the years, there are still traces of these tombstones, and there are so many that we can guess that this used to be a cemetery. The strangest tombstone of the Scary Fairy Cemetery. The strange part of this cemetery goes back to one of the tombs that is very long and wide. There is a
Ahriman created the desert spirit demons known as Da'avas, to serve as direct opposites to the celestial angels known as the Holy Immortals or Amashaspentus. For example, the demon Druj, who represents falsehood, was created to be the polar opposite of Asha-Vahishta, the archangel of truth and righteousness. Several of the Da'avas were once sacred Hindu deities, who were brought to Persia and transformed into evil spirits. In fact, the term Da'ava or Deva originated in India as a name that meant shining ones, and it was applied to both gods and demigods. The Da'avas are not necessarily eternal, but they have been around for a long time, spreading disease and misery all over the world. They are also keen on leading mankind astray by encouraging people to worship them, rather than pray to a creator god. The Da'avas are supposed to be kept at bay by living a clean and decent life, and enjoying the blessings of creation. Unfortunately, even the most upright people are vulnerable to Da'ava possession for approximately 9 days after death. Evil people, on the other hand, can be possessed while still alive, and there are several purifying ceremonies and specific prayers that can be used to drive the vile Da'avas away.
You guys want to know why I'm low-key afraid of Dua Lipa now? So there's actually this Iranian folktale that my dad told me about when she first popped off. It's about this long-legged man named Dua Lipa, which basically translates to long-legged person. So the story goes that Dua Lipa wanted to cross this large river, and so he asks this water troll to help him across. So after some persuading, the troll reluctantly agrees to help Dua Lipa cross the river. and he asks him to hop on his back. But as they're crossing the river, the water depth increases, and the troll asks Dua Lipa to loosen up his legs so that he can catch his breath. But Dua Lipa refuses, and they both end up drowning. And apparently, the moral of the story is to not let someone you don't know control your life. I don't know if the Dua Lipa we know and love knows this story, but I think about it every time I hear one of her songs or I see her perform. And as amazing as she is, the Persian fable got me.
Who is Rostam? Rostam is a legendary Persian hero known for his great size and strength. He wore a panther skin, wielded a club, and is known for his 7 labors, prompting many to compare him to the Greek hero Hercules.
Jinn. Jinns have no physical body of their own, and are creatures from an unseen dimensioned realm. Jinns can be both benevolent or malevolent. Jinns have the ability to predict the future, can read people's thoughts, have extraordinary strength.
I'm gonna show you a serial killer in 3, 2, 1. He has killed another girl. A 15-year-old girl. I don't mean to be rude, but his face looks like a piece of shit. His disgusting face is printed on the second page of all school textbooks. Doesn't this sound like a cult? Why should a 7-year-old kid see the face of a murderer every single day at school? Students have been drawing on his disgusting face for years now because we hate him. Another good and accurate drawing. Students have been tearing up his photos like this. This girl was among the many who did that. But the Islamic Republic security forces raided the school and checked to see if they still have that murderer's photo in their books. And she didn't. So they beat her up so bad that she passed away.
Did you know that Black Friday actually means something very different in Iran? Bringing up those words evokes memories of the Black Friday Massacre, which occurred on September 8, 1978. The Black Friday Massacre resulted in the deaths of reportedly up to 3,000 people, and it was a pivotal point in the Iranian Revolution. Basically, this is a very complex subject to talk about, but at the time, people in Iran were fed up with the governing body, the Pahlavi dynasty, and they wanted the governing body of Iran to be replaced by an Islamic republic. That summer, protests had been erupting all over Iran. People were really fed up with what had been happening. There were all these weird events that were occurring, like a movie theater fire that killed over 400 people that people thought was linked to the Iranian government. And on that day, September 8th, 1978, thousands gathered in a public square in Tehran, Iran, to protest the government. But what they didn't know was that the government had enacted martial law just days before. So at some point during this massive protest, government officials started opening fire and massacring people by the dozens. Now, while some people claim that only 90 or so people died during this event, various other news sources, chronicles, people that were there claim that over 3,000 people were slaughtered on that day. And although this was an extremely tragic event that is still remembered in Iran to this day, this led to the overthrow of the government. So even though the Iranian government at the time that day tried to squash the rebellion by opening fire on these protesters, that totally turned around against them, and once again, it led to the fall of the government.
In 1979, 66 American hostages were taken in Iran. 14 would be released, but 52 would be stuck in Iran for 444 days. The hostages were released on the day that Ronald Reagan replaced Jimmy Carter as the US president. Were they released because Ronald Reagan was a serious guy, or because Jimmy Carter negotiated the right way? 172 days after people were taken in Iran, Jimmy Carter ordered a military mission to rescue the hostages. The mission failed though because 3 US helicopters failed and another crashed into a plane. Jimmy Carter continued to negotiate with the leader of Iran, but he would not let hostages go. Finally, 443 days after the US hostages were taken, the United States agreed to give Iran a whole lot of money and clear its criminal record in exchange for all 52 of the captured Americans. That's pretty quirky, but some people don't believe that story. Why? I'll answer that in part 2.
There is a silent and mysterious cemetery in the southeastern part of Iran in the village of Tiz, an ancient village at least 2,300 years old. In the beliefs of the Baloch people, the jinns are associated with mystery and the deep silence of this cemetery and historical monuments. The cemetery of Jinn, what the Baloch call Jinsand, is one of these secrets. Locals believe that these tombs belong to the jinn. They have buried their dead in the fence of these stones, and when night falls, the jinn will appear on the graves of their lost ones and mourn them. They say that whoever goes to this graveyard at night will be cursed by the jinn and will shortly die with a severe punishment after a few days. Why is this cemetery known as the Cemetery of Jinn at all? The main reason is the tombstones of this cemetery. The tombstones planted in this cemetery are in such a way that they bear no resemblance to the tombstones of a human being. Although many of these stones were destroyed over the years, there are still traces of these tombstones, and there are so many that we can guess that this used to be a cemetery. The strange part of this cemetery goes back to one of the tubes that is very long and wide.
The sky is telling us something.
Iranian salt mummies. In the Cherabad salt mine in Iran, several ancient mummies have been uncovered, and they're honestly among the most horrifying mummies in the world, not only because of their appearance, but also because of their tragic backstories. In 1993, the first salt mummy was discovered by workers in the local salt mine. The mummy had a long white beard, iron knives, and a single gold earring. Experts believe the mummy dates to 300 AD. Several years later, in 2004, another mummy was discovered, and it was followed by the discovery of another mummy a year later. The sixth salt mummy was discovered recently, and the preservation of the mummy's body is astounding. His hair, bones, and internal organs remained intact. This is thanks to the high salinity of the cave. In fact, one of the saltmen was so incredibly well preserved that his boots even remained intact, so much so that scientists could still see his toes through radiographic imaging. Upon examining the boots, they discovered the toes of the man curled tightly towards the tip, suggesting he was wearing uncomfortable footwear while working. Scientists believe that the saltmen discovered in the caves were obtaining salt when they became trapped in the cavern. After all, many of the mummies discovered showed signs of trauma, indicating that the saltmen were crushed inside the cave. It's highly likely that all of them were miners who met their untimely deaths while working inside the mines. Number 8. The Cannibals of the Goff's Cave. In 2011, a macabre collection was discovered at Goff's Cave in Cheddar Gorge, southwest England. Archaeologists stumbled upon a cave that was most likely inhabited by cannibals around 14,000 years ago, after the last ice age. Several bones were discovered in the area, many showing signs of butchery. It was clear that the victims were butchered by fellow humans in order to be eaten. When they were dead, their bones were cleaned and carved into cups. Quite gruesome, huh? Number 7. Crystal Sepulchre Cave. In a cave in the Tapir Mountain Nature Reserve are several skeletons. Many of them are lying with their limbs spread, befitting their tragic fates. The skeletons belong to people who were sacrificed by the Maya in order to appease their gods more than 1,000 years ago. The youngest of the skeletons belonged to a 1-year-old child, and the oldest was around 45 years old. Almost all of the victims inside the cave died of blunt force trauma, indicating that many of them didn't lead happy lives. Number 6. Lost Girl. Imagine you're exploring a cave and you suddenly hear what you think is the sound of a young girl crying. You try to find the source of the sound, and after looking around, you do see a young girl crying all alone in the middle of the cave. That's precisely what happened when an explorer named Josh ventured into the ape cave in Mount St. Helens in the United States. They were far inside the cave when they began hearing the sound of a child crying. One decided to take a step back and turn around, but curiosity got the best of them. Luckily, they decided to walk deeper inside. As they walked further into the cave, and as the entrance became narrower, the crying noise became louder. They found a young girl in the middle of the cave who didn't speak English. Fortunately, they coaxed the girl into following them outside the cave, where her parents frantically looked for her. Number 5. Moaning Cavern. The Moaning Cavern in Vallecito, California is arguably one of the scariest caves in the world, not because of its daunting terrain, but because of the ghosts that allegedly haunt the area. The Moaning Cavern is popular for various activities in the area, from ziplining and gem digging to spelunking. What's more, the caverns are also famous because of the many artifacts discovered in the area. In the 1840s, gold miners discovered the Moaning Caverns, and inside, they stumbled upon arrowheads and other artifacts, including a necklace that's about 8,000 years old. Human bones were also discovered in the area. Now you're probably wondering how the cave obtained its name in the first place. You see, when the first visitors of the cave stepped foot in the area, they kept hearing wailing and moaning sounds, although we now know the unnerving sounds were caused by the wind. Number 4. The Haunted Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is the most extensively known cave system in the world. Many people from all around the world visit Mammoth Cave National Park. However, aside from its natural beauty, it's also well known for paranormal activity. There are more than 150 documented paranormal events around the cave. Not only are the numbers significant, but the witnesses are also credible people, even researchers and scientists. Certainly, scientists have no reason to lie about seeing a ghost, right? For this reason, the Mammoth Cave is also known as the most haunted natural wonder in the world. In 1839, the cave was purchased by Dr. John Croghan for $10,000. For that price, the cave also came with several enslaved people, including a cave guide named Stephen Bishop. Many were delighted by the tours offered by Stephen, but Croghan had a different plan. For some strange reason, he wanted to convert the cave into a hospital. The doctor built 11 huts inside the cavern, and initially 15 patients were transferred to the cavern. It was the beginning of a disaster. Shortly after, the condition of the patients worsened, and Dr. Croghan himself died of tuberculosis. Many of the slave guides died years later. People believe that to this day, they still return to the cave as spirits to see how things are. One of the new guides claimed to have seen a family of African Americans in a group he was guiding once. However, after finishing the tour, the family mysteriously disappeared. There was also no record of the family taking the cave tour. If you want to get spooked, there are countless stories on the internet about the Mammoth Cave.